As President Obama prepares to address the crisis at the border, a Central American cardinal responds. The latest on the tension in Israel over the murders of a Palestinian teenager and 3 Israeli teens. Christians on the front lines, stories of those spreading the faith in the world's most dangerous countries. And the Pope's app gets an update. Going mobile with the Holy Father. It's at your fingertips. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, July 8th, 2014.
What we are seeking are, in addition to additional authority, are additional resources where immigration judges, ICE prosecutors, and asylum officials can be made available to expand the capacity of that system so that we could reduce the backlog that currently exists.
White House Press Secretary Josh Ernst today. Good evening. I'm Brian Patrick. As we look at your news now, the administration is calling illegal immigration a humanitarian crisis. Now, President Obama is pushing Congress for $3.7 billion to deal with the influx of minors from Central America illegally crossing the U.S. border. This flood of migrants has strained resources, and it's causing a political firestorm here in Washington. Jason Calvi has our report from Capitol Hill tonight. Jason?
Brian, the White House is telling Congress that the money is going to be used to help solve the problems of why people are fleeing their home countries. But the money would also be used for border security, air surveillance. It'd be used for health care to treat these youth crossing the border. But it would also be used to send them back to their home countries. Now, one Honduran cardinal tells me today that this money's not going to fix the problem.
That's not any solution. They will waste the money. Many times people who didn't do it one time will make a second, a third, or a fourth.
Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga is the leader of the group of cardinals advising Pope Francis on church reform. He's president of the global charity Caritas and also a Honduran archbishop.
Instead of trying to build walls and fences, we need development. Development is the only solution to this kind of migration. And then combat to the drug trafficking, because the drug trafficking and the drug business has created most of these problems of violence against children.
20-year-old Erica Santoyo Ramirez knows that violence firsthand. She fled Honduras at age 15 when she lost her job because she was pregnant.
I didn't have anything to provide for my daughter, and I thought coming here was the best choice.
Erica traveled more than 1,400 miles on foot, horseback, and train.
I was rolling under the train. I felt the steam and all the heat in my arms from the wheels. I thought I was gonna die. I thought the train was gonna run me over. Someone jumped and got me out.
Now Erica and her daughter call the United States home.
It was worth it for my daughter, for myself too. I got a second chance. I got a chance to go to school.
Both Erica and Cardinal Rodriguez are both in town for the National Migration Conference. It's held every 5 years, sponsored by the U.S. Bishops, Catholic Charities USA, and also the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. I should add, Brian, that President Obama is going to be meeting with faith leaders, local leaders, and Governor Perry tomorrow to talk about this pressing issue. The White House says there's no plans, though, for President Obama to visit the border.
All right, thank you, Jason. On Capitol Hill tonight, we're joined by Daniel Stein, president of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Daniel, the bishops are pushing for immigration reform. What's the other side of this as you see it?
Well, Americans generally, and certainly in our organization, we feel strongly that border control is key to self-determination. Modern nation states, the American people, have to have the right to decide who comes in and who doesn't. We certainly applaud all Americans who want to try to help the situation in Central America. We should all try to do our part as individuals to fulfill the impulses we need and God gives us to help people improve in this world. But we have to have limits, they have to be enforced, and they have to be controlled.
This is being called a humanitarian issue. Is it just humanitarian, or is another side of this?
Well, young people don't show up in the situation they are now unless there's a reason. And the reason is that the Obama administration has created several loopholes that traffickers are using to encourage people to come, believing that they'll be allowed to stay. So we've been encouraging the Obama administration to close these loopholes and not send a signal that might cause people to get into situations where they're going to be killed or injured or another way exploited by these highly orchestrated malicious cartels. It's about money and greed and exploitation at bottom.
Will money solve this? The president pushing for $3.7 billion says that that's what he needs to address this. Will it solve it, and how would it be spent?
Well, look, the president, the administration, they got us into this mess in part because of tremendously conflicting signals they've been sending all over the world that's encouraged people to make this hazardous journey. The president can get us out of it, but only with effective leadership that actually improves the deportation process and makes it clear to people who are thinking about coming that they're not going to be allowed to stay. If people coming can delay their departure for years through a process that's not effective and never have to leave, then others are going to be encouraged to do the same thing. In the best of all possible worlds, everybody could move everywhere they want, but we just don't live in a perfect world.
What is the impact of migration on America's working poor?
Look, we have an important structural labor market changes today. Americans today, young Americans, middle-class Americans, having trouble seeing their economic role in living the American dream in the future. While it's great to help people where they are, and we think that's the solution, Americans have faced the reality that we can't be the home of last resort for all the displeased and dispossessed. Americans need the jobs of tomorrow: public school, education, housing, health care. These are all fiscal issues that the beleaguered taxpayer is not prepared to support for people who have no right to be here.
All right, Dan Stein, you made a great point. Thank you. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Israeli air and sea strikes have now claimed at least 15 lives. Palestinian leaders say 3 of those killed were children. More than 100 sites were hit today. Israel is mobilizing troops for a possible ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. The offensive is in response to a heavy barrage of rocket attacks against Israel from Gaza. A senior Israeli cabinet minister says Israel will continue the military offensive until that rocket fire is halted. This violence follows the abduction and murders of 3 Israeli teens, followed by the murder of a Palestinian teenager. Tonight, the parents of the 16-year-old Palestinian are expressing anger and grief.
Yes, people are with me now, but when I am alone, I know it is my son who is gone. It's me who lost a son, not the people, not anyone else. No one else lost a son, I did.
The police came yesterday night. They damaged the mourning tent. They threw stun grenades in its direction and injured some people who had come to give condolences.
A lot of Palestinians accuse Israeli extremists of murdering the boy in retaliation for the earlier deaths of 3 Israeli teenagers. Israel's leaders have denounced this vigilante-style killing. Joshua Morashvik is one of the nation's leading scholars on socialism and the Middle East. His book, Making David into Goliath, about Israel, was released today. And Josh, I think we can all agree that the killing of this Palestinian teenager was wrong. But it seems that his family is getting a great deal more sympathy than the families of the 3 Israelis who were killed. Does this tie in with your message in your book, why the world turned against Israel?
Well, I think it does tie in because the family of this Palestinian boy who was killed deserves all the sympathy in the world.
Absolutely.
And there's no question about that. And of course, the apparent perpetrators of this crime are already in custody, and the Israeli leaders have sworn that they're going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It would be an amazing thing if in all the murders of Israelis by Palestinians, if any one of them was ever prosecuted by Palestinian authorities. But we can wait a long time to see that happen.
I am fascinated by this book. I have lived 40 years of history. That's how long I've been in broadcasting. And I know 40 years ago, Israel had tremendous support from the U.S., from Europe, from the UN. And yet 40 years later, it's turned around. What on earth happened?
Well, I think there were 2 kinds of pressures brought to bear. One were material pressures. The Arabs hugely outnumber Israel, so there are 100 Muslims in the world for every Jew, and there are 22 Arab states, 57 Muslim states, and they have tremendous economic and diplomatic leverage, as well as using oil and terrorism to pressure people and largely to bring Europe to its knees. And then on the other side of this, there's an intellectual pressure that comes from the idea that Israel are the Westerners, the white people, the Palestinians are the post-colonial people who were oppressed and need their day in the sun. And with that kind of lens or dichotomy, the Western white people are always wrong.
Do you think that Israel is disliked partly because of its close association with the U.S.? There's a lot of dislike for America, too.
Well, I do. This trope that I've talked about, this intellectual trope, is aimed first and foremost at America, which is ridiculous because America was never a colonial state. It wasn't America who conquered Africa and Asia. We're the ones who liberated them. But America becomes the #1 target. But America is a difficult target. And Israel can be a kind of Cupid doll for America. So a lot of people who are now boycotting Israeli universities, they wouldn't want to boycott Harvard or Princeton or Yale because they're hoping desperately to get some deals with those universities. But Israel is a kind of fill-in for America.
Making David into Goliath, how the world turned against Israel. I'm fascinated by this topic. I'll be reading this. You can find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Josh, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, the voting is over in Afghanistan, but it's still unclear who the next president of that country will be. Candidate Abdullah is refusing to accept the preliminary result of the vote. He's citing fraud. He told supporters in Kabul that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will come to the Afghan capital on Friday for meetings to try to defuse what he called a crisis. State Department officials with Kerry in Beijing wouldn't comment on his travel plans. The Afghan Independent Election Commission released preliminary election results showing former Finance Minister Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai well in the lead. But the commission said no winner could be declared because millions of ballots were being audited for fraud. Armed volunteers are gathering in the Iraqi city of Samarra to defend key Shiite shrines against attacks by Sunni militants who've taken over a large swath of land in northern Iraq. The footage shot by a freelance cameraman in the volatile city shows these volunteers arriving in trucks armed to the hilt. They've created a militia called the Al-Salam or Peace Brigade. Excavators and earth movers are being moved in, most likely to fortify the shrines against attacks. Samarra is about 60 miles north of Baghdad. It's the Shiite shrines that contain the tombs of descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. Shiites consider them to be among his successors. The March for Life filed suit today against the Obama administration over the HHS mandate. This is the latest lawsuit by a nonprofit challenging the mandate since last week's U.S. Supreme Court ruling in favor of the two for-profit family businesses, Hobby Lobby and Conestoga Wood Specialties. That mandate forces employers, regardless of their religious or moral convictions, to provide insurance coverage for abortion-inducing drugs, sterilization, and contraceptives. If the employers don't comply, they face heavy financial penalties through the IRS. Jeannie Monahan, president of the March for Life, joins us tomorrow evening, and we'll talk about this further. Now, on the other side of the world, the Vatican Bank's balance sheet for 2013 was released today, and it showed a net profit of $4 million. That's way down from $118 million in 2012. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren is covering this development. Alan, why the big dip in profits for the Vatican Bank?
Here, Brian, they're saying that the Vatican Bank is in a period of transition. It's like any other bank. It serves clients in the Vatican, their Vatican employees, ex-employees, embassies to the Holy See, and also church organizations. And the money that they invest, that they have in these accounts, is also subject to the fluctuations in the market of any other bank. In this case, in 2013, there were some major expenses that they didn't foresee. They bailed out an Italian diocese. They also made some poor investments. And there were the costs of these ongoing reforms in the Vatican. They may have been spending more time on administration and trying to figure out what the Vatican Bank's identity was, rather than searching for new investments. And also, they were paying external consultants to the tune of more than $10 million is what they spent in 2013 to get advice on how to better manage their money. So they're really hoping that in the long term, it will end up being money well spent. Brian?
All right, Alan, I'm sure you'll keep us up to date on this important story. Coming up, licensed shops in Washington state start selling recreational marijuana legally. And we hear from an author who's writing about the courageous faith of Christians worldwide. From Pope Francis' official Twitter feed today, this is beautiful. With God, nothing is lost, but without him, everything is lost. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick as EWTN News Nightly continues. As Christians suffer persecution all over the world, one man brings a story of hope. He's traveled extensively, witnessing the gospel being lived and sharing it himself. Our Mark Irons has that story.
I'm a writer at heart, and I love telling stories of people's lives.
Telling one story in particular has been the focus of Tim Kazi's work over the last several years.
The gospel at work in people's lives, how Christ is building his church all over the world, has been a great privilege for me, and so I'm just writing their stories.
Tim shared some of the stories from his book today with the D.C. audience, and despite daily reminders of Christian persecution around the world, he brought this message back home.
In the face of tremendous opposition, in some cases bloody opposition, the gospel is advancing.
The executive director of Frontline Missions International, Tim has compiled stories of people boldly living their faith, and he says amidst their own suffering,
they were responding with forgiveness and mercy.
Those being persecuted aren't the only ones suffering. At this hospital in Cambodia, Tim saw AIDS patients on their deathbeds.
Just wanted to share all that I could share, which was the gospel, and comfort them with God's word.
Crossing rivers, climbing mountains, traveling to some of the most remote places on earth, Tim shares God's word, and sometimes more.
That was a fun day. We were able to take these Christmas boxes to these children in a schoolhouse in the middle of Tropoja in northern Albania. It was an opportunity to encourage them in their studies and, again, to share the most important thing, to share the gospel.
And that is Tim's goal.
When we see the power of the gospel in people's lives, it really magnifies God. It shows that the gospel is real.
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Mark. It is now legal to buy marijuana without a doctor's order in Washington state. Washington is the second state in the U.S. legalizing recreational pot. Colorado began sales of marijuana in January. Customers started lining up early for the marijuana store's grand openings. Managers had high expectations for sales.
We definitely are anticipating that it probably will run out the first day.
23 states, as well as the District of Columbia, already allow marijuana for medical purposes. Some good news tonight on the job front. U.S. employers advertised more jobs in May than in any month these past 7 years. More Americans also quit their jobs. This usually happens when workers find new, higher-paying jobs. It also opens up new positions for those with no work. President Obama welcomed NATO's Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen to the White House today. The Ukraine crisis and the wind down of Afghanistan combat operations among the topics discussed. This meeting comes ahead of the NATO summit in Wales this September. It's one of the most well-known fountains in the world. Now, Rome's Trevi Fountain is undergoing a major overhaul and disappointing many tourists. The Trevi Fountain was famously featured in Federico Fellini's 1960 movie La Dolce Vita. It's now been drained of water and covered in scaffolding in preparation for restoration work. The project will cost just under $3 million and should be finished by the fall of next year.
This is the most famous fountain on our planet, and it needed a significant restoration, and we are very happy to start it in a very innovative way, and this way will allow all the tourists to see the fountain during the restoration phase, and also to throw the coin, as a Roman tradition says. To come back to Rome, you need to throw in a coin in the Trevi Fountain.
Very disappointed. We've been to the Trevi Fountain before, but the people we're travelling with haven't, and we were hoping that they'd be able to get up close and toss the coin and make a wish.
A small tub of water at the rim will serve as a stand-in for the fountain. Many are still chucking in coins, taking the Roman legend to heart, but it's just not the same. Up next, a new device could help millions of visually impaired Americans read more easily. And want to keep up with Pope Francis's every move? Now it's easy with the Pope app. Thanks for joining us on Tuesday, July the 8th. I'm Brian Patrick for EWTN News Nightly, and thousands of people from 40 countries are making a 3-day-long peace march to Srebrenica in Bosnia. They're symbolically following the steps of those who fled that city in 1995. It had been declared a safe area by the United Nations in the waning days of Bosnia's civil war, but advancing Bosnian Serbs massacred up to 8,000 Muslim boys and men as others fled. This year, the march is in reverse, arriving in Srebrenica on Friday, the 19th anniversary of that massacre. A funeral will be held for 174 victims whose remains have only recently been recovered from mass graves. A powerful typhoon is pummeling the southern Japanese islands of Okinawa. U.S. forces based there are canceling all their outdoor exercises. The Okinawan government said 10 people were injured, one seriously. TV footage showed a building shattered, damaged storefronts, and toppled trees. Local airports were closed. Hundreds of thousands of people were advised to evacuate, but many of them stayed. The typhoon was packing sustained winds of 120 miles an hour with gusts close to 150 miles per hour. Though diminishing now in intensity, the storm is moving slowly over a wide area. Forecasters say that adds to the potential for damage. For the visually impaired, a ring being developed is no piece of jewelry, but it could be a valuable tool. Our Catherine Elliott has that story tonight.
Ray, Kansas, Ray with...
The classic Yellow Pages ad said, "Let your fingers do the walking." This ring-sized device lets your finger do the reading.
Family could go.
While there are other character readers on the market, researchers at MIT say none are this mobile.
The finger reader is an assistive text reading device for people with visual impairments.
The finger reader connects to a laptop or mobile phone. They spend 3 years working on the software and experimenting with different designs.
We have built in a few cues for the scanner, the person who's reading, to help them stay within the line.
Jerry Barrier has helped test the finger reader. He says it can help with reading anything from restaurant menus to forms at a doctor's office.
Everywhere we go, for folks who are sighted, there are things that inform us about the products that we're about to interact with. I want to be able to interact with those same products regardless of how I have to do it.
The finger reader is just a prototype now.
But we are very interested in taking this a step further. Our evaluations and user studies actually were very encouraging.
Researchers hope to produce a marketable device with an affordable price, a potentially groundbreaking solution for the more than 11 million visually impaired Americans. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. A World Cup official suspected of facilitating a ticket scalping ring has now been released from police custody, pending further investigation. Ray Whelan was arrested Monday in his luxury suite at the hotel where FIFA officials stay. Police confiscated his computer, his cell phone, and 82 tickets for upcoming games. Reselling tickets for profit is illegal in Brazil.
It is in the interest of football, of FIFA, and we believe of every fan in the world to see that tickets are dealt with properly and in accordance with the law. We as the governing body of football are the first to want to see this matter fully investigated and solved quickly.
Whelan was escorted to his hotel after being released. Under Brazilian law, prosecutors can't charge him until they receive a complete police investigation, which could take 30 days. So for the rest of the tournament, he will not be allowed to leave Brazil. That doesn't seem like a big punishment to me. Stage 3 of the Tour de France was full of crashes and bumps for several favorites. Despite a tough race, German Marcel Kittel rode to victory by a half wheel length. Vincenzo Nibali still wears the yellow jersey of the overall leader of the cycling race. Early on, defending champion Chris Froome and others fell and crashed to miss spots on the podium. The race continues tomorrow along the Belgian border over cobblestones. Experts say that stretch may be the roughest yet. I can believe that. Well, now you can carry the Pope in your pocket thanks to the Vatican embracing the latest technology. The Vatican just released an updated version of the Pope app. The Holy Father got a demo of the app from the head of the Council for Social Communications. The Vatican's own media service created the app so people can follow the Pope's activities. It's available in 5 languages and includes papal tweets, homilies, and news. You can also follow Vatican City webcams live and watch live streams of papal events. The Pope app is free. You can download it from iTunes and Google Play stores for Apple or Android devices. And be sure to download the EWTN app. That's how I watch EWTN News Nightly, the encore at 9 o'clock. Be sure to like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter and watch anytime again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for watching tonight. Good night and God bless you.